receives the opening kickoff. It's Trey Benson. Crosses over the 20 with a seam past the 40. And Trey Benson is into the open field inside the 20 with a stiff arm. And how's that for a start for the Noles?
Travis takes a shot down the sideline looking for Wilson. He's got it! All the way down inside the 20.
All right, we are talking Florida State football on the Our Lads Football Network, the OFN today. And for the first time, we welcome Matt Baker to the program from the Tampa Bay Times. Covers college football for the paper, also a Heisman voter. So they believe Matt knows a little bit about college football. So, Matt, great to have you on here talking Florida State football for the first time.
Sure, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So how long have you been covering the team for?
So I've covered Florida State in some capacity going back to I think the first game I covered would have been my first year at the time, so the 2011 season. A little bit here, a little bit there. And then I've been covering Florida college football as a whole full-time since 2015. So I've covered my share of FSU, the very good, the national championship and the playoff and all that stuff, and then the very bad and a lot of ugly in there too.
Yeah, and we're at the point in time now where this could be the biggest year that you've covered the team, correct? Is that what you're thinking?
It's not going to be 13. It's not going to be 2013. I was around that team a lot. And honestly, I think when you look back at that 2013 Florida State team, I think it gets underrated kind of in the annals of history. You think about like the best teams of my lifetime. You go to, I think it was the 95 Nebraska one and 01 Miami. And,
sure.
And honestly, the Bama won a couple and 20 when in the pandemic. But Florida, that 2013 Florida State team was awesome. I mean, they barely got challenged all year and were able to beat Auburn there at the end. And you look at the talent on there, great college players, some good NFL guys still in there. That's an underrated team. So no, I'm not expecting the 23 FSU to win a national championship. I'm not. But can they win the ACC? Yes, absolutely. Can they be in the playoff conversation in December, late November, early December? Yes, absolutely. And if I had to pick today, I think they're in the playoff.
Yeah, it's early days. I have a lot of interviews to do this month with some other top teams, including, matter of fact, our schedule coming up includes like Georgia, and Michigan, among other teams. Also have Iowa, Notre Dame, Auburn, Oregon, and so forth. But even though that's the case, some of the research that and remembering what the team did last year, this is a loaded team. And I really believe it's going to come down to what it usually comes down to in football. It's going to come down to the close games, the coaching making the right calls, get a little luck, but also the quarterback. And we know how talented he is. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the one thing that is holding him back is I think there are times in pressure situations I think he could do a little bit better. Now, maybe that's experience, but I think if he can handle himself a little bit better against the top teams in big games, not that he's had a lot of those opportunities either, then anything's possible, especially if he makes that leap up in his final year here. Anything's possible.
Yeah, Jordan Travis has certainly played well in some big moments. That he played, he was the difference between then beating Florida and then losing to Florida in the regular season finale. The way his Houdini moves and getting out of some stuff.
Yeah.
The players that I've seen with my own eyes who can do that, it's Bryce Young, Lamar Jackson, and Jordan Travis. That's the list. The way he was able to escape stuff. And not just escape stuff, but turn what could have been a 5-yard loss or a 10-yard loss, not just into nothing, into 20 yards and a touchdown, and like that type of stuff. So he's been able to do it in the past. The Miami game a couple years ago on 4th and 14, where he had a chance to drive late and made the biggest throw at the time, the biggest throw of his life, and maybe still, where it was in 4th and 14. and en route to Andrew Parchment that set up the go-ahead touchdown to beat Miami. And that was that was a turning point for the program, it was a turning point for him, and a turning point for Miami on the other side as well. But he hasn't done it consistently. He hasn't been consistent over his career, certainly even last year. You look at the end of the North Carolina State game where he threw an interception in the end zone.
Oh, that was and
that was one that stuck with him, and it has still stuck with him. And if he can learn from some of those, and he's going to make the great plays. But I go back to something that Dan Mullen said when he was at Florida. He needs a quarterback not just who can make the spectacular plays, but make the unspectacular plays, right? Where sometimes the best thing you can do is check it down to the running back and get 4 yards. And I think Jordan, we've seen he can do the spectacular. If he can do a better job, a more consistent job, I should say, of doing the unspectacular stuff, that will be the difference between them beating LSU in week 1 or losing to them. It'll be the difference between beating Clemson in week 4 or losing to them. And I think ultimately it'll be the difference between them winning the ACC for the first time since 2014, or them being second or third behind Clemson and just being another very good team rather than a great one.
Well, you've seen a lot of really good quarterbacks in college football. His talent, where is his ceiling, do you believe? Do you think he has a ceiling that is unknown? That, hey, I don't know, maybe he ends up as a top 10 draft pick next year in the NFL. Does he have that kind of ceiling?
I don't think just in terms of the talent stuff, I don't think he's top 10 pick. I don't think he has the size. I don't know if he has the arm strength and the consistency and some of that stuff. But if we're talking about, he's already a really good college quarterback.
Yes, big difference. Yes,
and he has a chance to be a great one, and potentially he could win the Heisman. Like that is legitimately in the cards. That's a legitimate possibility. I mean, you look at obviously Caleb Williams at USC and Drake May at North Carolina and Daniels at LSU. There's some really good quarterbacks in there, but I see no reason why Jordan Travis cannot win the Heisman this year. It is within the realm of possibility, and that can put him in that rare air in the annals of Florida State history. So yeah, the NFL, no, I don't know that he's going to be Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Bryce Young or something like that. But can he be a great college quarterback? Absolutely. Yes. I see zero reason why not.
Well, he is 14-1 right now to win the Heisman, which is about he's in that next tier with everybody once you get past Caleb Williams. So I agree. I mean, if anybody out there wants to take a chance on a few players, I definitely think Travis is the guy, because he's got the games too. You need the games, and he has them, especially the LSU game that you mentioned. Wow, what a way to start the season. And it's one of those things where after you beat a team the first time and it's one of those back-to-back year kind of deals, that's great that first time, but then the next year it's like, oh, that's right, we beat this team, we got to beat them again. And it's not so easy to do that, especially a team like LSU. But that really, not just for the team, of course, but for Travis, as you said, really want to see. This is SEC now. The LSU is considered one of the best teams potentially, that right after Alabama or Georgia, I think maybe LSU can be a national championship team. That's going to tell us an awful lot about Travis and the team this season right away.
Right. And then comparing it to last year as well, I think that's instructive. Because last year it was Brian Kelly's first game at LSU.
A lot of unknowns. Yes.
It happened. It was a thing. It was obviously a close game, went down to the block extra point at the end. But I do think year one, the coach is figuring things out, and certainly the first game. I mean, I didn't know what to expect from anybody in that game in the Superdome. So, yes, Florida State won. Credit to them, all that stuff. But my point here is not to downgrade Florida State's win, but I think LSU is going to be up a notch.
Yes,
compared to where they were last year, just because you've got that familiarity. You know that the players know what to expect from the coaches know what to expect from the players. That sort of thing, which were those unknowns are heightened in year one and kind of at the peak in week one of year one. So that's going to be gone, which makes this an even tougher test, I think, for FSU. But the other side of that too is Florida State knows what to expect too. Like a year ago at this time, I could have seen Florida State as a top 10 team in 2024. I could have also seen Mike Norvell fired or going into this year.
Yeah.
And anything in between. But the fact is, they know what they have in Jordan Travis. It clicked. I don't have a detailed explanation other than it clicked with Travis, with Mike Norvell and the coaching staff, with the players they brought in, mostly through the transfer portal, but some high school guys as well. Everything meshed and it clicked the back half of this season. And we're going to find out whether it clicked because Florida State is, dare I say, Florida State is back, or because the teams they played at the end of last year were not that good.
Sure.
And a lot of them were dealing with backup quarterbacks. Even Louisiana and Miami had a quarterback was hurt and that sort of thing, where maybe there was a little bit of fool's gold. And so I think this year is going to be kind of the real sign of, is Florida State building something, and have they built something, or was last year's 10 wins a little bit of a mirage?
And I got to tell you, again, as an outside perspective, from my perspective, from what I see on paper and how they ended the season, and I agree with you, it wasn't like they had that signature win at the end of the season against some sort of big top 5 team or anything like that. But still, they made a lot of progress. It's been a long time, of course, as you know, that they've been relevant on the national stage. There's been some phony kind of teams and, some expectations so I get all that. But this is the first time in a while that I've looked at this team from top to bottom, offense, defense, quarterback, coach been in there a while, systems in place, that I'm saying, with the schedule, even if they split LSU Clemson and then run the table, I think they have a shot for a playoff team, and who knows what else. It's college football, and if Georgia doesn't, nowadays it's about, okay, that dominant team is still there. But if Georgia, for some reason, just has a hiccup, they are replacing the quarterback and other players, as they often do, but quarterback especially. If they just have a down year, maybe they lose a couple of games, and maybe that's wide open, then I think Florida's got a great chance. And I think if they don't put themselves in that position, I think that's a really bad sign, because I think it's set up for them perfectly.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And even looking at just Clemson's wobbling in the ACC.
Yep.
I'm not going to say that Clemson, that they're dead. I'm not throwing dirt on them. But they haven't been Clemson the past couple of years, the way they were from 16 to 19-ish, somewhere, plus or minus. They haven't been that dominant. And you can look at the way Clemson lost some assistants. Jeff Scott, been the co-offensive coordinator, coming down here to Tampa to USF, where that didn't work out, and Tony Elliott and Brent Venables, and maybe some of those things show up a lot. Like, just to bring it back to Florida State, the Bowden dynasty began to wobble and eventually topple when they started losing the really good assistants, the Mark Ricks and what have you, and Bama being able to just reload and have one assistant. Oh, this guy leaves. All right, we bring in another one. That doesn't happen. That's not right, sustainable. Yeah. That's the exception rather than the
that's the Belichick. Saban is the Belichick of the college football. Same thing.
Correct.
You've seen it with Belichick. Yeah.
Correct. But eventually, that's not going to work out. And maybe Clemson's at the point now where it's just not going to work out. The secret sauce is gone, and I don't know. But my point is that it's there for the taking.
It is.
Florida State's got the talent. They've got the returning roster. They got a staff that was remarkably stable as well. Alex Atkins, the OC, could have been a head coach. I think there were some opportunities for him if he wanted it, but he wanted to stick around.
Okay.
And you add that type of stuff up. This is an absolutely pivotal year. Just to be blunt, I think the minimum expectation is to make it to the ACC championship, and assuming they're healthy and all that stuff, this is a team that should win the ACC. And I think it's at this point where they are, and let's not forget where they're trying to go, right? With all this realignment stuff heading into that. I think it's kind of ACC championship or bust for this team. That's not a fair expectation, maybe, but I think that's where they are, or where they should be.
By the way, you mentioned Atkins. Is he the guy mostly responsible for the development of Travis?
No, I still think that goes on Mike Norvell to a large degree, because there were guys before him too. Kenny Dillingham worked with him, and then went to Oregon. He's now the head coach at Arizona State. I think where Atkins has done a fantastic job is redoing the offensive line. He's the O-line coach, and it is hard to understand if you didn't watch the Noles regularly how bad their offensive line had been. Not just bad; it was historically bad by Power 5 standards for a bit. You look at what Dalvin Cook did when he was there. Dalvin Cook did what he did despite a bad offensive line. If he had a good or competent offensive line, we were talking about a Heisman guy with his talent.
Yeah.
So they were so bad just for a bunch of reasons, recruiting misses and transfers and injuries, and a whole storm put them together where they were awful for a while in offensive line. And that's not a position you can just microwave and, boom, we're back. But Norvell brought in the pieces, and Alex Atkins should get a lot of credit for developing them. Guys in the portal, Dylan Gibbons played really well last year, one of the better guards in the ACC for Notre Dame. Meach from Charlotte played really well. Just bringing in a bunch of guys that meshed to the point where last year the offensive line was at least solid, probably better than solid. And this year, when you look at just the returning guys and then the transfers they brought in, like Jeremiah Byers from UTEP, a guy from Colorado, that they should be not just solid, they should be good or really good with a great back, a really good back end and Trey Benson behind them. So that's we talk about Travis and the Heisman. It's not just what he has done; it's the pieces around him. Where the offensive line should be really good, the receivers are there, the playmakers are there. All of that stuff is set up to succeed now.
By the way, I've just posted our lads' depth chart at Florida State as we go over it, and let's try to get into specifics then. So, which top incoming transfers are the ones that we need to keep an eye on? Which are the ones that they're relying on the most?
Yeah, like I said, Byers is one of the offensive tackles, or offensive linemen, I should say, that he's going to be very impactful, if nothing else, just in the rotation. Because I think one of Florida State's strengths is the fact that they do have some guys, plenty of offensive linemen who can play, and that's going to be very important when you're
tons
playing
of depth. Yes.
Yeah, the depth is going to be key. And then Fentrell Cypress as well, the corner from Virginia, is one of the major high-profile guys, where he was one of the better DBs in the ACC last year. Goes in, he's going to be an immediate contributor and maybe an all-ACC type player. And I guess the other one I'd throw out too is Jaheim Bell, tight end from South Carolina. Norvell, to me, what he did really well at Memphis is take whatever he had. First of all, find talent and take somebody like Kenny Gainwell, who was a little bit too short but really, really fast, and then figure out a way to make him work. And then some of the receivers he had, Coxey and those guys, and Antonio Gibson is a running back receiver type hybrid.
Yes.
He would take whatever players he could get and maximize them to their potential. And then you add in a guy like Jaheim Bell, who was probably listed as a tight end, but he can go in the backfield. He could probably line up wide. He could be an H-back. They can move him in all sorts of situations. And Florida State, one of their issues last year is they weren't great in the red zone. Now you add in a guy like him.
Yeah.
He's going to be an X factor. And if I'm looking for reasons to be really positive and optimistic about Florida State, that is absolutely one where you've got an absolute queen chess player type situation, right? Where you can put him in all sorts of situations and he can make it work. And then you add in the guy, I guess the grandmaster of my bad analogy here, but Mike Norvell, who knows how to use that piece.
Yep.
That's going to be a major, major impact.
And they also, they added in Keon Coleman from Michigan State to go along with Johnny Wilson at receiver. Johnny Wilson, I mean, how good do you think he could be? Is he the most talented player on this roster?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, just with his size and speed and leaping ability, yeah, I mean, he's got absolute first-round potential. His issue has been consistency.
Okay.
Too many drops when he was at Arizona State, and then too many drops at Florida State last year. He would go and make some absolute circus catches. There was one against Oklahoma that was just, unbelievable. But then he had too many drops in there as well. And I think he would tell you the same thing. If he can clean it up and raise the floor and just be more consistent, he is going to be absolutely dominant. There's zero question. And yeah, I should have mentioned Keon Coleman from Michigan State, because he's a guy who was one of the better receivers, one of the leading receivers in the Big Ten last year. And then, again, just another piece where he can be 1A or 1B in this receiving core. And then another play. Mike Norvell likes to say his system is built for playmakers. And he's done a great job of going out and getting playmakers, particularly through the portal, who are going to be able to put something together. And if everybody buys in and, I eat today, you eat tomorrow, if that all works, you can see it working at a really high level.
All right. And then the running back situation. So Benson was the top guy, or is the top guy coming back. And, he's got really good size. Do you think he's got another level? Is he going to be clearly the number one guy? I know they got a couple other guys behind him, though.
I think he's probably going to – I don't know that's going to be a clear number one.
Okay.
But, he will be number one. What he showed last year that he was capable of it. He was a guy that – I think Norvell was the first one to offer him when Norvell was at Memphis and Trey was a high school player in Mississippi, but had banged up and had a knee injury. He ended up going to Oregon and didn't work out. And I don't remember the exact stats, but I'm pretty sure he had more rushing yards against Miami, against Mario Cristobal when he was playing for Florida State last year than he had in his entire career for Mario Cristobal at Oregon. There was something weird with that, but that was another time where Norvell saw something, he and his staff did, and this guy's still got it, and they were absolutely proven correct. But yeah, there's other guys in there too. Lawrence Toafili, guy from my neck of the woods over in Pinellas Park, is one who's shown flashes of being a very good playmaker as well.
All right. So we know that offensively, we've gone through a bunch of names already. We know how explosive the team can be on that side of the ball. So defensively, what would be the biggest concerns? Do you think the run defense needs to statistically, it wasn't all that great, but what do you think is their biggest concern? Is it the secondary, or is it their run defense?
I think it's just getting off the field. Oh. That was kind of one of the issues where there were times when they struggled last year. And when you look at the losses, particularly Clemson and Wake Forest come to my mind, that was the issue where they had times to get a team off the field and they couldn't do it. But if we're talking about what's going to keep Florida State from being, because again, I think they can be a playoff team. I don't see them as a national championship team, barring some craziness or a major development and step forward that I don't envision yet. So what's keeping them from that? It's the depth. They've got some really good players. You look at Jared Verse, the DN transfer from Albany, who had a very good year last year. I think he's going to be a star this year and potentially a first-round guy. You look at Fabian Lovett, a defensive lineman who's got a bunch of NFL potential. And some of the other guys, the top is there. But when you look at like what Georgia has been, right?
Oh,
where
yeah.
They have the top guys, and then the second tier is pretty much
they're not there yet. No.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. And again, no, Georgia is Georgia. There's only one, maybe Alabama. So I understand they're not there, but that's the type of thing that to me separates Florida State as a very good team, but probably not an elite national championship winning team.
Yeah. And that just also it shows you why it's important. And we saw that with the Georgia-Ohio State game last year, that if you have that difference maker at quarterback, you can overcome that type of team in one game situation. So that's why, and again, anything's possible. It's not like they're 40-1 or 50-1 to win the national championship. That might have been last year. Now they're a serious outside type of contender. But everything, including, of course, keeping these main guys on defense, because offensively it looks like they have a little bit more depth and they can deal with an injury here or there. But defensively, I agree with you. It looks like that if they were to lose a key player or two, that might especially hurt them. Who's their Cypress is their top guy in the secondary then. Do they have another guy? Is it Dent? What are you most concerned with in that secondary?
Yeah, Dent is a guy who's very interesting just because he's kind of had to play different roles over his career. And, he came in as a blue chip guy, and I don't know that he's quite lived up to the billing that he had. So he's certainly one that's interesting as well. Because they're the secondary. It's good. I don't know that it's elite or anything like that. And then let's remember too that probably the best player in that secondary was Jamie Robinson, the safety. Who he was one of the only guys who I think he was the only player who really had a choice whether to leave or not for the league and chose to leave. And that to me is another reason why this sets up so well for Florida State, where I guess just to kind of broaden it for a second, they did a really good job of retaining talent. You think about traditionally over the years, college football is a talent business, it's a talent acquisition business, is what a lot of coaches like to say. But in this era with the portal and NIL, it's also a talent retention business.
Yep.
Where, yes, you need to bring in the dudes. Sorry to use the technical term, but the dudes. You have to bring in the dudes. But once you have them here, you have to find ways to keep them. And that's not as easy as it used to be because everybody can transfer once. Money is a factor. Yeah. Right? Let's just be honest.
Yep.
So if you can find ways to keep those guys happy and get a guy like Fabian Levitt to return, get a guy like Jared Verse to return, get a guy like on offense Jordan Travis to return, get those pieces back and keep them happy with the system, the playing time, the progress, NIL, the plan for them to develop to the NFL, all that stuff. That's one of the things that's going to make or break championship teams in this era. And Florida State did a fantastic job this offseason in terms of having the infrastructure and all that stuff around them to where they would keep the guys that they needed to keep with Robinson as pretty much the only exception off the top of my head.
Well, again, I think that's why, as we said in the very beginning, this is such a big year to take advantage of everything is just set up so well that this doesn't come along more than every 2 or 3 years. And for these types of programs, again, not Georgia, Alabama, but these types of programs, and you have to take advantage of it. What would you say? Let me ask you about if Travis, he'll be gone, and we've seen, Rodemaker? He's come in and played pretty well. Is he the future? Is he the number one guy next year?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He played well after a bit in the Louisville game when Travis got hurt, and that was a level that I think people in the program thought he had, but I don't think a lot of outsiders would have agreed with that.
Okay.
Just because from what he had shown in the past, he had been very inconsistent, but he did a great job at Louisville and helped him win that one. AJ Duffy's been viewed as kind of the quarterback of the future, and let's not forget this is a portal era.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm not predicting that Florida State has to have a portal quarterback. I'm not saying anything like that.
Yeah.
But it would certainly not surprise me if something works out and Norvell's been great through the portal, so it would not surprise me if Florida State goes to the portal this next cycle to find if there's somebody who's very good and would make sense to replace Jordan Travis.
Is Duffy? Does he have the talent to keep that potential transfer away? Is it possible he could be the guy next year?
Yeah. I mean, he was a blue chip guy, very highly touted, and it's just we just haven't seen enough of him yet. He was a freshman last year, so I take that for what it's worth. He's certainly, as we will sit here today, I don't know that it's a need that Florida State has to have a transfer quarterback. But if you look at Norvell's career, I don't know that he has started a quarterback who was not a transfer for any length of time. Even going back to when he was at Memphis and some of the times at Arizona State too, if I remember right. It's just kind of a weird fluky thing because he can develop quarterbacks. Like, look at what Jordan Travis was when he got there. Look at him now.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference.
Sure.
But it just hasn't, the timing, the way it's worked out yet. Mike hasn't done a lot of that yet. So that's just kind of a thing to watch. It just specifically about Florida State and Norvell, and also just about the era as a whole.
Couple quick things before I let you go. What would be, you get the 4 big games: LSU, Clemson, Miami, Florida. Give me a potential under the radar big game or trap game, or say what you want, a game that you would say, you know what, this one might be bigger than you think.
Those are the big ones.
Because they go on the road to Wake and Pitt. Those are the other two kind of, and Boston College.
Pitt and Duke are the tricky ones. Pitt, you said, yeah, that's on the road. That has the potential to be dicey. As I look at the ACC, it's a clear top 2 with Florida State and Clemson, Florida State if you prefer. But then like the 3 through like 9 or
Wide
10
open.
is, I
Nobody knows.
don't know.
Nobody ever knows in the ACC.
Correct, and that's part of what makes the league fun. But
Yeah.
I think Pitt is always going to be pretty stingy. I think Pat Narduzzi has proven himself to be a good coach at this point. So you give them the benefit of the doubt, and then Duke as well.
Oh yeah,
where they had a 4-loss first season under Mike Elko, which was remarkable. You dig into that. I think they were plus 16 in turnover margin or something. That's just like insane. You're not going to have that again. But even if they do regress a little bit, I still think Duke can be plucky with Riley Leonard at quarterback, and again Elko doing what he did in year 1. So I think those are the potential ones that would trip Florida State up.
Yeah, that Pitt game, of course, also not only the second back-to-back on the road, but the week before Miami. So
potential trap,
yeah. Okay. Can you give me a breakout player on offense or defense? Somebody that hasn't really made a name for himself, but you think could make a name for himself this year? Offense, defense.
I think Tatum Bethune probably did some at linebacker last year, but I think he has another gear.
Okay.
And linebacker is a position where FSU just hasn't been that great the last few years, but I think he's got potential to really take his game to another level there.
Okay.
You can't call Jared Verse a breakout guy after last year, but I think he can go from very good to
superstar
to awesome. Yeah. I think that's in the cards. On offense, I mentioned Jaheim Bell as one.
Okay.
I think I would probably go back to him just because he played well at South Carolina, but like the numbers weren't great. And I don't know that I don't know that South Carolina used him the way that they could.
I agree.
Have.
Yeah.
And he's got in this system with everything around him. I think he's going to be a real X factor with a chance to be, I think he's got a chance to be really, really, really good. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. He's got, again, and if he's used properly, which I'm sure he will be, he could be somebody definitely to keep an eye on. And finally, prediction. What are you thinking?
I think Florida State, I think they probably split LSU and Clemson. I view both of those as toss-ups, honestly. So I think they split them. I think they go to the ACC championship, and I think they beat Clemson. And then I think they're in the playoff. I've said that before, and I see. I left the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando after they beat Oklahoma, and there was this team was riding high and all that stuff. And I remember thinking, how good can this team be next year? And I remember thinking they could win the ACC. And then within a day or two, I was like, I'm underselling them. They could be a playoff team.
Sure.
And I have seen absolutely nothing since then to make me to dissuade me from that opinion. That again, this stuff is going to have to break the right way. They're going to have the injury luck, and all that stuff is going to have to break the right way. But I see no reason on paper why Florida State can't win the ACC and be in the playoffs. So I think that's the ceiling, and I think this team can get there.
And I think it's great for college football when you can name brands, whatever you want to call them, traditional powers that we grew up with. I mean, these are the ones that I think really help college football out. Not having Florida State, Florida, Miami be relevant as kind of Notre Dame. Yeah, they've done stuff, but they're not where they used to be. And so it's nice to see. Maybe USC also, we get them back, which would be nice. So all that stuff's great for college football. So, and I appreciate it having you on here, Matt. And I look forward to having you on again, hopefully, to talk more Florida State football, especially if it's going to be as big as a year as it might be.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks.
You got it. Take care, Matt.